Good afternoon, everybody. I would like to welcome you all to this policy dialogue, to the people in the room, but also to those of you that have joined online. And no, I'm not Oksana, but she's coming here after me. I'm Amanda Paul, Senior Analyst in the Europe in the World programme. And I want to thank you all very much for joining us for this policy dialogue at such a pivotal moment for the EU's enlargement policy. As the EU is, let's say, re-engaging with enlargement, I think we need to consider that technical progress alone is not enough. It's all very well to implement reforms and make some adjustments here and there, but what the candidates really need to see is progress in terms of opening clusters and opening chapters. And this is when we get to the topic of political will. What we need to see is consistent political will at the European level. Even the very best designed entry frameworks and the strongest efforts from candidates are struggling to deliver concrete results. And when we look at the results that Ukraine has made, I mean, they're pretty incredible, particularly because they've happened under wartime conditions. And this really needs a credible and meaningful response from the side of the EU, rather than just, saying, well done, you're doing a good job. But unfortunately, Hungary is blocking the fundamentals cluster. So this is where gradual integration offers a really practical way to ensure that progress in reforms translates into some measurable and meaningful benefits. This means opening sectors much earlier than what was perhaps previously the case, reducing barriers faster, and ensuring that achievements are really tangibly rewarded. And of course, this doesn't just apply to Ukraine, it applies to all candidate countries. So today we are going to explore priority sectors, look at remaining barriers and the steps that are needed to advance Ukraine's economic integration. I hope that we can also reflect on how to strengthen the credibility of the accession process itself, because only with sustained political commitment from the EU can gradual integration fulfill its purpose and bring Ukraine closer to EU membership. We have a really good panel of experts to discuss that with us today, but I'm going to hand over to my colleague to introduce them, to Svitlana Taran, who is a senior fellow in our program, and then she will introduce our keynote speaker. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Amanda. Thank you for your remarks and for highlighting that, yes, economic gradual integration can actually support the formal accession process and strengthen it and reinforce it, especially at this very strategic moment. And I would like to continue, invite Oksana Diakun, Deputy Head of the Mission of Ukraine to the European Union, for a short keynote speech about the strategic importance of gradual integration during accession and during the war.
Now. Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank to the EPC for organizing today's event and for your constant attention to the issue of Ukraine's EU accession. It is very important and is, as it was mentioned by Amanda, especially now. Today is an important historical day in Ukraine. On this very day, in 1991, more than 90% of Ukrainians said yes at the referendum, which confirmed the Ukraine's act of declaration of independence. And there is only one issue that unites Ukrainians as much as our independence, and it is the European future. For Ukraine, EU membership is an irreversible strategic choice backed by the will of our citizens. It is a choice underpinned by shared values that our people defend on the front line for almost 4 years of full-scale war and 11 years of Russia's aggression, paying the highest price. It is a choice which is also reaffirmed in reforms that we are implementing in the wartime conditions. Ukraine's accession is unprecedented in all possible ways. It returns European integration to its original purpose, security and stability in Europe. And not in vain, Ukraine's EU accession is one of key pillars of post-war security guarantees for our countries, and at the same time, a crucial element of the future security architecture in Europe. Well, our goal is clear. We want to complete the preparation for the accession by the end of 2027. For this to happen, both Ukraine and the European Union must deliver. Currently, and it was mentioned already, Ukraine's accession negotiations face unjustified political blocking unrelated to any non-fulfillment of our obligations. It is important to overcome this obstruction and open Cluster 1 as soon as possible. While political issues are addressed, technical work with the 26 member states must continue at Koala level, aiming to finalize the EU positions for all clusters by the end of the Danish presidency. And we are ready to do that. At the same time, as it was mentioned, it is important that gradual integration into the EU single market goes on. It allows Ukraine to gradually implement EU standards, align economically, and deliver tangible benefits for our economy and citizens. A significant progress has been already made on this track thanks to the implementation of DCFTA. And I would like to briefly mention where we stand on key tracks. And I will start with trade. The recently updated association agreement under the Article 29 is paving the way to predictable trade relations with the potential shifting from commodities export to expanding supplies of high value-added goods to the EU. The tariff review under the Article 29 was a difficult compromise, but Ukraine is ready to fulfill its commitments and accelerate the adaptation of Ukrainian legislation to the requirements of the European production standards as part of the comprehensive arrangements. Currently, we are seeing significant losses in our trade with the EU in agricultural products compared to previous years. And we count to the EU assistance in restoring Ukraine's presence in traditional export markets, as it was agreed with the EU Commission in June 2025. This primarily applies to the markets of the countries of the Global South, which were lost due to the full-scale invasion. Well, internal market integration. Here, our priority is agreement on conformity assessment and acceptance of industrial products, so-called ACA agreement, which we are interested to conclude as soon as possible with the EU. The Ukrainian side has practically fulfilled all the main prerequisites for conducting an official assessment mission and opening negotiations on the ACA. Ensuring that Ukraine meets the European level of quality and safety requirements for industrial goods is a cornerstone element for maintaining the competitiveness of Ukrainian products in the EU single market. For us, it is also an important element of our future recovery and reconstruction to make sure that our industrial goods are in line with the European standards. In this context, I would like also to mention the new EU initiative, the EU Single Market Highway, which is open for candidate countries and which offers possibility to align and reinforce each of three main work streams for us in this regard: supply chain partnerships, regulatory integration, and integration of business communities, while ensuring a green and sustainable industrial transformation. Another important element which I would like to briefly touch is energy and green transition. We are determined to accelerate the integration of the EU and Ukrainian energy markets. Strengthening our interconnected systems enhances mutual energy security and makes the whole region more resilient in the face of external shocks. This integration includes the diversification of energy supply routes, rapid decrease of dependence on Russian fossil fuels, and steady transition towards clean, sustainable energy sources. And electricity sector has been a vivid example of successful integration. Since last year, the full synchronization of Ukrainian and continental European power systems has been in place. Looking ahead, we expect full coupling of Ukraine's electricity market with the EU by 2027, which will create one of the most dynamic cross-border electricity markets in Europe. And let me also stress that despite all current challenges, Ukraine remains fully committed to EU's long-term climate goals, including the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions and the vision of a climate-neutral European continent by 2015. Another important element which is very much present now in discussion here in Brussels is defense. I'm sure that all who are here are very much aware about the potential of Ukraine to strengthen Europeans' readiness and preparedness in the face of hybrid challenges which are already here, but also potential deterioration of security situations. So our battle-tested experiences, our high-tech base is there to strengthen European security. And it is very important that ongoing new initiatives like like Safe Instrument and EDI program are used to strengthen, are used to advance this integration between Ukrainian and European defense industry. And in this regard, I would like to mention that just this morning, it was announced by Commissioner Kubilius that 15 member states out of 19 have included Ukraine into the national investment plan. So it's a very good sign, and it's a very good way forward for Ukraine to become part of European Defense Union. Also, I can't not mention digital area where Ukraine is a renowned pioneer. One of the key milestones in this process is Ukraine's accession to the EU Roam Like at Home policy. Soon, as of 1st of January 2026, Ukrainian will be able to communicate across Europe without additional roaming fees. But it's not only about roaming, it's much more that Ukraine can offer to the EU in terms of its digital, its potential in digital area. I would like to conclude by making a couple of final points. Ukraine has a lot to offer as a future member state. Ukraine's accession would strengthen EU with new market, human capital, and innovation potential. A larger, more cohesive EU is better equipped to manage supply chain, energy transition, and technological competition. Since receiving a candidate status, Ukraine has made real, measurable progress, not only in implementing reforms, but doing so under circumstances no other candidate country has faced. And despite daily threats, our institutions are functioning, reforming, adapting. Ukraine is not just transforming, it is contributing. We bring with us an agricultural sector, and I'm sure that it will come up in today's discussion, a growing digital and tech industry, and one of Europe's most resilient and motivated populations. These are strengths for Europe as a whole. Ukraine is not asking for favors. Ukraine is doing its part. With reforms and determination. And I very much hope that today's discussion will contribute to better understanding of the benefits Ukraine is bringing for the EU single market and Europe as a whole. Thank you.
Dear Oksana, thank you very much. Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for your very comprehensive overview and mentioning about all major elements of gradual integration as they are seen by the Ukrainian government. And I hope we will discuss them a little bit later with our panelists. So please let me introduce our excellent panelists today. We have speakers from both from Ukraine and European Union and from different areas of expertise like policy making, business and think tanks. So I would like to start with our Ukrainian speakers. And next to me is Veronika Movchan. She's the academic director of the Institute for Economic Research and Policy Consulting, which is a very well-known think tank in Ukraine for its expertise on exactly Ukraine's EU integration. And then I would like to introduce Oleksandra Avramenko. Oleksandra is the head of the EU Integration Committee of one of the biggest Ukrainian agricultural business associations, Ukrainian Agribusiness Club, UCAB. And she's also an honorary advisor of the Deputy Prime Minister of Ukraine for European and Euro-Atlantic integration, Taras Kachka. Also, European perspective in our discussion will be presented by Janis sorry, it's very difficult for us. Aizsalnieks, thank you from the set time. Janis is a team leader for Socio-Economic policy team from Ukraine Service, DG Analyst, European Commission, and also online with us from Warsaw is Marcin Nowacki. He's a vice president of the board of the Union of Entrepreneurs and Employers, ZPP. So welcome, dear panelists, and I would like to inform you that we will have 2 rounds of questions. So you will have 5 minutes for about 5 minutes for your speeches and takes, and then it will be followed by Q&A session. And please prepare your dear guests, prepare your questions already, and also online speakers, you can also prepare your questions. Online audience. And my first round, I would like to start with a more strategic question about gradual integration. There are different even terms for this concept. Sometimes we can often hear accelerated integration, sometimes a sectoral partial integration. And there are different also visions how it should be the model, how it should be implemented by candidate countries. But in general, it means that non-EU countries are allowed for the part of, are allowed access or integrate in the part of EU policies or single market before any membership on the basis of their regulatory approximation with the EU legislation, and in different areas such as public procurement, industrial goods or services. And gradual integration is a part of our accession process, which is actually referenced in Ukraine's negotiation framework. And also gradual integration is a part of EU-Ukraine accession agreement and the DCFTA agreement, which is deep and comprehensive free trade agreement. So it's rather complex concept, and I would like to, during our discussion, for us to figure out what in practice gradual integration means, and why is it so important now for Ukraine and for the European Union, and how actually to accelerate it. And I would like first to start with you, Janis, as with your perspective from EU policy making. And my question is, since there are so many terms for gradual integrations, and experts suggest different models for its implementation. What is the European Commission approach for gradual integration of candidate countries, and how it should be interconnected with the official accession process, formal accession process, especially with the opening and closing of negotiation clusters, and how it should be designed, what should be the benchmarks, and also I think I should ask this question taking into account recent developments in Ukraine about these anti-corruption cases. Some experts actually suggest for gradual integration to be linked to conditionality requirement on rule of law and anti-corruption reforms. Do you agree with this approach? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Svitlana. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Great to be here to discuss this very important topic that me and my team have been working in the past years in the DG Analyst. So my team has been in charge of coordinating the accession and screening process of the Ukrainian legislation in the past more than a year and a half, where we have cooperated closely with the entire European Commission, with a lot of ministries in Ukraine, and we have completed the process now in September. And during this process, in different directors general of the European Commission, more than 1,500 lawyers or policy officers looked at the whole body of the Ukrainian legislation, how it corresponds to the EU law in the 33 chapters, as you know how it is. And of course, this process has now allowed us to crystallize and identify where our legislation is aligned, where there are still some gaps on the Ukrainian side, and where we need to work for future. I think it's very timely and good discussion right now, because we are approaching a kind of moment of reflection and crossroads. I mean, also practically, I think tomorrow is our annual meeting of the Association Committee in Trade Configuration between European Commission and Government of Ukraine, which is an annual point of reference to review the progress and set priorities forward. But just coming closer to the questions that are on the table, and Deputy Head of Mission of Ukraine already listed a vast majority of the gradual integration opportunities and directions that we can pursue. And I'm using word "can pursue" because, of course, it is DCFTA that stands behind legally what we could do at the moment before Ukraine becomes an EU member state. Since DCFTA, association agreement and DCFTA were signed, we have had those opportunities on the table. First of all, of course, in the area of trade, in services, in public procurement, to pursue gradual integration. And we will come in more details a little bit later, I understand, in a later ground. But now that we have this new situation of Ukraine becoming a candidate country, that also, of course, gives a new perspective on a process. And just to clarify here that, of course, there are different terms. So there's gradual market integration, there's accelerated cooperation, which is more used in a context when several EU member states decide to get together and do more than the EU acquis is requiring. And Ukraine also has a possibility to participate in that cooperation as well. So every time we open the screening process for a new chapter of the EU law, we also asked Ukraine whether Ukraine is interested to participate in accelerated cooperation, which means in that part where member states are doing even more than EU law and policy is requiring. So in a way, being in a group who are cutting edge, how we are going to move forward in one or several areas. But just to again come back to the main question here, DCFTA has is so to say no regret measure. So for the EU accession in any scenario, it is something that Ukraine will have to go, or every candidate country will have to go through in any case, and it is a measure that can bring tangible benefits before the accession. It is already legally in force. And let's remember that association agreement and DCFTA is the agreement that's going to remain in force until the day of accession, whereas accession negotiations are taking place with the view of making sure that EU acquis is in place on the day of accession. And on the day of accession, of course, also Ukraine is going to get access to the single market and get access to all the possibilities that single market, because here we are mainly talking about the single market, but access to the market will provide, whereas gradual integration will give that ahead of the time. DCFTA, in a way, can help us to prioritize what to look at, what to work on. DCFTA can also build the credibility of Ukrainian authorities, of Ukrainian policy making, of Ukrainian institutions, because of course now that we are proceeding to different types of access to single market, European Commission, as it was rightly said, will have to make an assessment of capacity of Ukrainian institutions to ensure market surveillance, for example, to ensure safety and quality and security. So European Commission will have to assess that process, and that is going to be also guiding very much towards how things are going to be built then later in other sectors, which are maybe at the moment not covered by the single market. So I think these possibilities are extremely important. They're going to be leading our way. They're going to show the example for other sectors, and they're going to bring also tangible economic benefits to economy of Ukraine, and will help in a way make these steps into the European single market, also helping EU member states, EU economic communities to absorb Ukrainian economy and get our value chains connected before we actually merge before Ukraine joins as a member state. I'll stop here and happy to discuss further and answer other questions if I didn't cover yet.
Thank you very much. And also about rule of law and anti-corruption,
Definitely. I mean, I in a way, there's no way not to agree with this notion, because look, as part of assessing capacity of Ukrainian institutions, operational capacity and capacity to enforce and implement, it also means that we need to look at the integrity of these institutions, at the ability to withstand the pressure and ability to fight corruption. Therefore, for example, in a specific area such as market surveillance and product safety controls, which could technically be subject to pressure. This is certainly essential, and part of the capacity building that is required is in order to build credible institutions, the part on the anti-corruption is built in. It is not maybe pronounced so visibly. It comes together as ability to build credible functioning institutions, but that aspect of being able to inbuild the work and fight against corruption in the system is really part of it and will be assessed as part of it. I don't think we need to put anti-corruption requirements head-on in each single area, because I will just recall that in the accession negotiations, there's of course the chapter of fundamentals, which includes specific areas of rule of law and fighting corruption, which will never be closed until the day of accession. So it will always be open and subject to assessment, and therefore I'd say that the areas which are more technical, such as, let's say, free circulation of goods, services, or capital, or people, yes, we need to make sure we build credible institutions, but this corruption and the corruption aspect must be part of it, yet I don't think we need to have a specific book to tick there, because we will always have the anti-corruption chapter open, and it will have to be looked very seriously, and credible results will have to be delivered both on the national level but also inside these themes.
Thank you very much for your clarifications, and also for signifying that DCFTA is a legal base for gradual integration, and maybe we will later discuss if it's adequate and enough for the current moment or should be revised, and in what way. Thank you very much. And now I would like to turn to you, Veronika. You are, as a Ukrainian think tanker who has been monitoring the implementation of Ukraine Ukraine Association Agreement and DCFTA for many years. I would like to ask you in this respect, how would you assess Ukraine's progress in gradual integration, which is actually included in the association agreement, and for already more than 10 years of its implementation? What has been successful so far? What remains pending, and why?
Thank you very much. Okay. Dear friends, dear colleagues, it's my honor and pleasure to be here and to discuss the topic of gradual integration. In association agreement, we call it economic integration, because it was then at the beginning of the process that was the only option of integration. There was no accession perspective. Then the association agreement was negotiated. So what we had in association agreement initially was almost everything that we could have got in economic area. Now the situation is absolutely different, and the stimulus on both sides and the opportunities are actually larger. Also, I fully agree that association agreement and DCFTA still stay a very important legal basis, and even after more than a decade of implementation, we are still having most of our tasks ahead of us. For some of them, we are just one step before completion, but for many, this step, we need much more than one step. But before I come to the specific things, I want to highlight one important notion. It seems that all in this room, at least all speakers so far, agree on that. But we have to understand that gradual integration, accelerated in cooperation, whatever we call it, economic integration, it has to be treated as a part of accession process. Even this gradual integration, it requires some extra efforts compared to the accession. You still have to sign Rome at home agreement. You still have to monitor something to sign first ACA. You have to do extra steps. And if there is a capacity constraint on Ukraine or on EU side, let's keep accession path first. Don't try to get these so far already low-hanging fruits of gradual integration, delaying the whole process, because the whole process is much more important than economic benefits of gradual integration, which are important either, and if we can manage both, that would be perfect. Then we are comparing accession and association agreement. There are two striking differences. First, it's about comprehensiveness of the task and the involvement of both parties. Janis already mentioned this association committee and trade for configuration meeting annually. We have other meetings, but basically this process, the scope of association agreement, the scope of legal harmonization embedded in it, did not fully match the resources that both parties had to implement it, and more importantly, to check that everything is online with what EU needs into regulatory aspects. That is it was very visible in, for example, UCAB, for which Ukraine first said we did it, I think in 2014. We did it. We are still in 2025, and we are still finalizing. And partially it was because Ukraine was not fully understanding all nuances of the process, and the EU didn't have sufficient resources, I presume, for verifying and giving almost immediate response. Now, with the screening process, with so many people worked on Ukrainian legislation, we have much more clear picture what was done, what has to be done, what are deficiencies, how to move forward. It's a huge work that creates absolutely new landscape, both for accession but also for association agreement. And now the changes in Ukrainian legislation are much more closely monitored, and the response comes not in the 3 years after we've already built something on the wrong fundamental. It's a process now, and that is really great. And second, I think very important change that I hope my colleagues from business confirm or dispel, that now business understands the perspective, much more clear perspective and much more attractive perspective, because becoming a member of the EU common market, internal market, is much more important than reduction in duties or expanding in TRQs. That is also good and important, but the goals are absolutely different. And that creates absolutely different momentum for business, especially for things that are not such tangible as duties, but for things that were creating level playing field, like intellectual property rights, like competition policy, like corporate things, and many other aspects that were not bringing something that you can touch, like lower duty or agreement with ACA, not with, but agreement on conformity assessment and acceptance of industrial products, or recognition of equivalence, or common transit. So the perception of changes also evolved. And all that creates a perfect opportunity for deeper integration now, and hopefully full accession sooner than later.
Super. Thank you. Thank you very much, Veronika, for your such a positive assessment of the current opportunities and momentum, and actually motivation for gradual integration, and from all stakeholders in EU and Ukraine, and business, think tankers, policymakers. I also can see this momentum, and we need to use this opportunity as much as we can. And also, I would like to thank you for mentioning ACA, because I think it's a very strategic agreement for Ukraine. And even if we sign it for only 1 or 2 or 3 sectors at the beginning, it would be a big step for Ukraine. And it's like a recognition of all the reforms that Ukraine implemented during all these years, and actually acceptance of Ukrainian quality infrastructure as a infrastructure that in line with the EU standards and EU legislation. And of course, it's a big step for building a mutual trust between our regulatory bodies and systems. And again, it's about economic integration of industrial goods. So I do anticipate this when this will happen. And now I would like to turn to you, Oleksandra. And to see it from the Ukrainian business perspective, I would like to ask you the same question: why deeper economic integration or gradual integration is so important at this moment for Ukrainian business? What is your perspective, and how much is Ukrainian business actually is prepared and motivated for this integration? Because, as was already mentioned, it requires higher regulatory compliance, investment requirements, and also reciprocal market access opening in both sides. So, what do you see the major challenges, risks, barriers, and how to at this stage, and what you expect from the government, from EU and EU side, Ukraine side, how it can help you? Thank you. I can.
We are not picky, so let's do the way it is.
Because it's online. For us, it's great, but for others, okay.
Do you hear me with this one? Okay. So I will have to change. Marcin, I was saying I'm happy to see you online, and we have not met in a while. So that was the thing I was trying to say.
It just started.
Because otherwise you can't see. Okay. We'll fix it. One more time, thank you very much for inviting. Regarding the questions you've asked, again, speaking as a business representative, I need to maybe remind you the conditions in which Ukrainian business and also Ukrainian agricultural sector is working right now. First of all, is a very challenging environment in which you don't know exactly what to be prepared for the next day. Unfortunately, Ukrainian business does not have this privilege of planning year ahead or maybe months ahead. Usually it's very short perspective of planning, unfortunately, which does not give that big space of maneuver, and to be prepared for any other, let's say, big challenges that are ahead of, which is also include the European integration. And we basically need to fight the war, prepare for the blackouts, but also think on the logistic issues that we're facing. I mean, only with the European Union this year, we had 3 trade frameworks all of them were different. We had ATM before June. Then from June till October, we had the transitional DCFTA version 2021. From October 29, we have DCFTA version late 2025, 2026, out of which half of TRQs are being critical with inability to export, even in the limit of the existing TRQ. So from the perspective of the business, can tell you that it's quite difficult to prepare to something that one might not understand to which exactly it prepares. I'm being very frank and honest, because when we have the trade framework changes so often, that's on one side. On the other side, we receive such a huge feedback from the European partners, which are also agricultural producers, that we are not that much welcomed, or like we're working not in the same regimes of production, and it's unfair trade. I mean, we can bring everything to the picture. And on one side. On the other side, from the perspective of Ukrainian producers, not of the Ukrainian producers actually understand what is going to happen when Ukraine becomes an EU member state. Why? Because sometimes it's mistakenly taken as just, we are already exporting to the EU. What else will change for us? Basically, this is one of the questions that are raised by some of the producers, because there is not enough communication also from the side of the government to Ukrainian producers, wherever sector it will be. Because, you know, those that are deeply involved in the cooperation with the European Union understand that European integration will bring changes to all the spheres of our life. We have these 33 chapters, which are basically all the spheres of, and I mean, agriculture is influenced. We're trying to understand which chapters would impact agriculture. And guess what? More than half of them would influence the agricultural sector. But because they're not directly influencing, but they are involved in all the processes of life of any business entity. And as more we will have the communication, we need communication from different stakeholders and different sides. We need to have communication with the European Union, so the European Union also understands the challenges we're living in, what support we might need from the European side. Because, you know, I'm not gonna open America here or be the explorer. All the previous enlargements were followed with the structural funds. All the previous enlargements were followed with the technical assistance that all the previous member states were receiving over the course of implementation of the European acquis, and also preparedness to start working in already fully European environment from the day one of accession. Or maybe with the transitional periods for each country that were specific. That's on one side from the European perspective, but we also have internal perspective when there should be more communication between the government and the business in explaining what is happening. And here we get to the point that we are very limited with our capacities inside, and that's where the cooperation between the government and the civil society, and also supported by the European Union. I mean, this synergy altogether can actually be very much helpful for the sector, for any sector, but for the economy in general, to be prepared to become an EU member state. But the important point, what I wanted to say here regarding why it's important to have this DCFTA and like why it is important for us, I will just give you one quote from representatives of agricultural sector. They were saying, I think that was the floor producers. They were saying, we were granted with the ATM, granted fully liberalized access to the European Union. Because we're unable to export to any other third market because of the logistic issues, we were exporting to the EU. This gave us possibility to earn funds which we further reinvested in the EU standards. This is what happened between 23, 24, and partially 2025. Unfortunately, the amount of producers that managed to get access to the European Union with this was very limited. And this was something that we were trying to advocate inside the European Union. We understood that there were sensitivities in the ATM regimes. We were completely understandable from the point that these sensitive products will be limited in the updated DCFTA. However, we were hoping that less sensitive products will be fully liberalized. With this, it would be partially gradual integration of non-sensitive products to the EU single market. And those products would already be way more advanced in terms of alignment with the EU norms and standards than all the other producers with the sensitive products. But it is the way it is. We have right now the updated DCFTA. We hope that in 2028, 2029, we will revise it again with further liberalization. But I mean, without the proper stabilized access also to the European Union on one side, but to the third markets as well, because I mean, we're limited not just with the EU, we're in general limited. Without being prepared for trade in normal conditions, it will be way more difficult for the businesses, whatever sector they represent, in order to be more in line with the EU standards. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your insights. It's a very good quote. Thank you for this especially and for this link between the motivation to invest into the EU standards and actually greater market access. I think it's the way how it should work. Yes, that greater market should motivate for more alignment with the EU standards, and you now confirm this. It is works like this. Thank you very much. And also, I would like to turn to European business perspective about Ukraine's gradual integration, and to Marcin. Actually, I have the same question to you. Is Ukrainian accelerated or gradual integration is an opportunity or challenge for European business and especially for Polish business? Can it be in some way mutually beneficial for both for Ukrainian and European business? And what are the main challenges do you see at this stage? And again, how would you recommend to mitigate and or to address these challenges? Thank you.
Very much, and good afternoon. Also my pleasure to see some of you and to listen to your interventions. Definitely this is a benefit for Ukraine. I think this is also beneficial for member states, and gradual integration is happening, especially from 2022. I think Ukraine and Ukrainian companies have taken really major step in terms of the integration, understanding of the market, of the whole framework we are operating in. I would mention a couple of areas. One is financing, second is single market, the third one is defense. And finally, the perspective of the private sector. I think starting from the financing, this is already happening. We have tools, ways to send funds from the EU to Ukraine. Of course, the major program is Ukraine Facility, Pillar 1, and the macroeconomic stability. But if you look at the work on a multi-annual financial framework that will start in 2028, there are a number of ways where Ukraine is also integrated. We can take the Connecting Europe facility, where we have 10T and 10E networks. and Ukraine is a part of it. Please refer to the change of the TEN-T network across Europe, where Ukraine is included. So even like ongoing works on a multi-annual financial perspective covers Ukraine and this Ukrainian angle. So this is very important that we have a stable and predictable way to integrate Ukraine. Then, of course, it was mentioned before in the opening speech, the defense sector, both EDIP, SAFE, they cover Ukraine, Poland, other member states as well, have submitted the plans for SAFE for last Friday. So within the Polish plan, we have 43 billion euros for defense as a part of the SAFE plan. And again, Ukraine can be a part of it, and Ukrainian companies will be getting funds and potentially purchases from the EU level. In terms of the single market, yes, that was, I think, the best experience we've had so far. Really cross-sectoral in terms of the access to the single market. ATMs were mentioned. That was, I think, great exercise for both Ukraine member states to see how it works in terms of the access to the single market. Amending the CFTA is, of course, a follow-up, and I'm sure it's gonna be repeated potentially next year. The only thing is to balance. I understand the perspective from Ukraine side that the way we amended the CFTA is not the greatest one. But this is also the perspective at number of member states level. So it's always a compromise how to really approach the integration in a gradual way, because that's the part of it. But definitely it was extraordinary for Ukrainian companies to have this access and to exercise how the EU market is regulated, how it works, what kind of tensions you may and you will face in the future. The same for the market of services. This is actually the market we still call in Poland, number of member states, that this is not an open, free single market. Market of services is heavily divided by member states themselves, but still Ukraine has this access to, and number of sectors from digital to transport is the subject of operations in the EU. So that's good. Although again, I think we need to advocate. EU business, Ukrainian business, to open up more the market of services. This is still the issue, very political, and often we businesses are within the EU. I'm not mentioning the integration process for Ukraine or Moldova, but within the EU, we use licensing and a number of other sectoral domestic regulations to block this integration. So this is still the way, long way to go in terms of services. But we need the feedback, the support of Ukraine in that process as well. And the private business perspective, I think this is, the level of Ukrainian companies being exposed to the single market was, as I said, really amazing. But also there's a different process happening right now, that number of Ukrainian companies become EU businesses. And this is, this is a development of last 3 years. but I think it's still accelerating. There are more and more companies that invest, enter EU market with the physical business presence as a legal entity, as a business that is operational, and even often that invests within the European Union. So that's another level of exposition of Ukrainian business in the EU, that they simply must and operate as EU entities. And this is, I think, that the best lesson for other players, other marketplaces in Ukraine, to get to know how it works, what's the situation, sector-specific situation, and the approach we have, or the discussions that we have on in terms of our regulations, looking at the program of the European Commission. This is something that I observe Ukrainian companies follow as well, and they become the part of the discussion. Given the new customs code that we heavily discuss at the EU level, I see a number of Ukrainian companies being a part of the discussion as well, because there are both players, strong business players in Ukraine, but also they have entities in the EU, and that influences them as well. So this is the change we see for last months and years. That wasn't the case before 2022. Of course, this is something that, you know, for what Ukrainian companies, Ukrainian economy was forced to do so. But in the longer perspective, this is very beneficial to have this really fast pace of integration, and very different, I think, still different way that in terms of Poland and other member states in the region that we faced 21 years ago and earlier as a part of the path to the EU. So I think again, financing is critical. That Ukrainian entities get to know how it works, have the perspective of external funding within Ukraine. A single market is key. I mean, I represent business organization in Poland, but we also are quite active in the EU, in Brussels. So I think this is the most advanced gradual integration we can observe. But defense will, I mean, from the public-private perspective, defense sector follows to a large extent. Yeah, so that's what I see. You know, looking forward to have more integration, but at the same time, you know, representing Polish business, I understand that as it was said, sensitive sectors that you know, it takes time to integrate. As I said, that's a different process compared to Poland. But even at the time Poland entered EU in 2004, for a number of sectors or even access to the labor market, we had doors closed. So that's something that is not known in Ukraine, and kind of strange given the current experience. But we were not allowed to freely work in number of member states. Given the example of Germany, there was 7-year period where we couldn't enter easily, openly the labor market in Germany after the date of entering the EU. So these examples are important to understand how it goes, how you know difficult it is to find this level playing field and full integration. That also related to number of products or sectors where we had exemptions on both ends. So again, this is a different experience, but lessons learned are important. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your very constructive position and about Ukraine gradual accession. And I think that we need to learn how to actually implement these constructive dialogues between our businesses and our governments, and to find some sometimes difficult compromise decisions, but to move ahead and to push it ahead. So and I know that you, Marcin, you need to leave earlier. Yes. So thank you very much. It was very comprehensive, and thank you for participation. And for now, I would like to open our second round of questions. We need to hurry up because there are not so much time left. But I would like also to start with you, Janis, and to ask about where does Ukraine currently stand across key areas and sectors of gradual integration, in which sectors we have the highest level of preparedness and regulatory compliance with the EU, and what are any timelines you can provide for us? Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. I mean, it's been, I think, very interesting reflection from different sides, and I also wanted to come in and to continue on the thoughts that were already mentioned here by also Veronika. For example, on the aspects of what should we do first, and just from my perspective, I would say that it is evident that gradual market integration is a complicated exercise. And from the perspective of, for example, ACA and the free flow of goods in the single market, if country manages to achieve ACA agreement, it is almost 90% of the EU law in that chapter being fully aligned. There is no cutting corners in this area. In order to get the industrial goods on the market, you simply have to be fully aligned on all the horizontal legislation, which includes accreditation, market surveillance, standardization, and so on. And then, of course, on the sectoral legislation, let's say machinery or which other standards we are taking, or which other sector we are taking. Ukraine is already halfway or half aligned in the area of goods. And when Ukraine will achieve ACA, I'd say that there will be only few elements left on the sectoral side. So I think that, I mean, as I said, this is a no-regret measure. Ukraine would have to go through it. The only question is whether it is feasible right now for Ukraine because of its capacity constraints and so. But it seems to me we are doing good progress right now. So there is no question about it anymore, it seems to me, because we are expecting adoption of law on market surveillance very soon. Hopefully, we were expecting it adoption very soon already for some time. So I hope it will not take much longer. But I think the signals are very credible that we will probably get it very soon, and that would open up as a next step to start negotiation of the agreement on the access of these three groups of industrial products first. And then we will have a list of another 24 other groups of products that we could cover already on the basis of the current DCFTA because they are listed in the annex. Nothing also stops us from expanding this list, but of course that needs an agreement of the Council of the EU member states. So. And speaking of the agreement of the EU member states, I mean, some of the difficulties of going very fast forward is precisely because of the way how the EU decision-making is organized. It's either by the anonymity or by the qualified majority. And most of the time we need, in these aspects, or very often we need anonymity, as you know, but sometimes we can proceed with qualified majority, but even that is a lot of work to achieve, right? So we need to be realistic on what we can achieve. So I think on ACA, we should expect, and I'm optimistic that we are going to get good news soon. I also hope so. I think another group of good or another good news are going to be in the area of services. DCFTA already envisages that Ukraine could, in principle, have access in 4 areas of services to the internal market, which is telecom, postal, maritime, and financial. In digital or telecom, this small part of the Roam Like at Home is going to be now covered as of 1st of January. For the consumers, nothing is going to change because European mobile operators have so far extended the voluntary approach or have given to Ukrainian roaming already these services on a voluntary basis, but now from 1st of January it's going to be in a way a process that would be settled now in a way forever. So Ukraine will join this internal market, EU internal market for these services. The other element of services where we are expecting a progress is actually SEPA, so fast payments. It wasn't yet mentioned, but it's going to be a significant news when it will happen. We have seen that Moldova joined SEPA just about months ago, and we're already seeing figures that it is generating, like benefits for the private citizens, for the companies. I mean, the fast payments in 1 second are much more. I mean, it's a lot of saving to businesses and to the population. There are different estimates that what it could do, but I mean, the quick estimates could say that the savings for the all individuals combined and businesses combined can amount to several hundreds of millions of euros a year for what it is right now. So it will be a major breakthrough, but for that we need more work on the legislative alignment, specifically on the anti-money laundering legislation, and we are expecting that to happen. I don't know when exactly would it be, but we also hope that we could see it in the coming months, and then the process could be triggered. Trade was already mentioned, and I think it was very substantial. Of course, ATMs actually exposed the tremendous resilience and the kind of flexibility and the potential of the Ukrainian companies, by growing up their production capacities very quickly, using the market access possibilities, right? So it all is a testimony of what is possible. But then, of course, on the EU side, we also need to kind of conduct and lead this mutual integration step by step in a way that is kind of satisfying all market participants. And of course now the new agreement that was reached under the Article 29 on extending the tier codes, of course it's not as good as the ATMs were there, but it also shows the road forward in terms of alignment with the EU production standards, because this is something that will have to be done anyway, and it is also something that is already in the DCFTA and association agreement and would have to be done anyway. So there is more additional incentive to speed this process up, and it would also feed into the better and quicker positive assessment in the enlargement negotiations, so you will be able to open and close these chapters quicker. So in a way, we are pushing forward also the enlargement process with these reforms. I would only. I know that we have a couple of other elements in the internal market integration. I know we will be working, and we are working on energy sector. It was already extensively covered. Defense is something that is not envisaged so much by DCFTA, and there will need to be a new grounds, and the new grounds are being developed as we see Ukraine is getting involved and integrated in this kind of common procurement and a cooperation in the defense sector. I wanted to mention specifically public procurement, because DCFTA includes this roadmap on the mutual market access in a public procurement. Ukraine is doing now significant reforms in the area of public procurement. There was a new law on concessions and PPPs just adopted, and the new draft law on public procurement is awaiting adoption. We have been consulted in a process of revising these laws, and we think that the versions that are there are already good progress forward towards alignment. They will not be, and they are not yet fully aligned with the EU regulations. In that sense, we will probably not see the moving forward on the roadmap of the public procurement under the DCFTA, which would open up the public procurement markets between Ukraine and EU. I mean, there's a caveat that already under WTO, we have opened some aspects of the public procurement, so companies already have some access. But in order to get the next level, Ukraine would need to align with the specific utilities sector, and that we don't see. And we know that there is a plan for a new law on utilities, which would then bring us into this. But here, what I wanted to say about public procurement, our technical assistance programs are supporting Ukraine in these reforms. And one of the aspects that they are doing a lot is trying to connect Ukrainian companies to the EU value chains, to the EU businesses, and also introduce how to participate in the EU public procurement for Ukrainian companies. So, because they can already participate in it in parts. And there we have noticed precisely what you mentioned, that companies do not have this capacity to follow non-stop, what's going on in different, jurisdictions, in different markets, and what rules, what not. And they need support from business associations, from those who can support, in order to actually participate in these public procurements. And I know that from my own country that there is, because of these capacity constraints, companies, first of all, don't know the rules, they don't know how to do this, and if they are helped, they would gladly do so, because they would like to grow up their business, and that's also something that we have noticed on the side of the Ukrainian companies. I'll stop here. I think there are many possibilities, and we would just need to follow up on all of them. And one of the things is also Ukraine's participation in EU programs, and that's where Ukraine is building its capacity and is getting support in this regard.
Thank you very much. It is very promising for Ukraine. And I would like also to quickly ask Veronika, maybe you want to add something. Which sectors would Ukraine would prioritize now, or we should follow in all this in one simultaneously, or how do you see? And also we mentioned about the DCFTA agreement and this priority action plan for DCFTA 2025-2026 with all these sectors listed. Do you think that maybe it is quite ambitious as for the moment, or we need maybe to revise it and again with the consultations with Ukrainian businesses and create something more ambitious?
Thank you. Let's start from the last question about the priority plan. I don't think that we need to revise it. It's a good roadmap to understand what we planned, even if sometimes we do not implement that because it's not the first road plan. We already shifting priorities partially and maybe to the large extent to the war and the limited capacity of handling everything. But these plans seems to be much more realistic. We already implemented a lot from that was planned. I don't have another list of sectors. I can add to what Janis already mentioned. We can add SPS, recognition of equivalence. We can add authorized economic operators. We can mention the road agreement, the shipment of rice by road that was prolonged and we are moving forward. But I actually want to add a couple more numbers because that's what our institute is doing. We are estimating the impact of different changes and trying to get the most comprehensive picture of the overall impact of the EU accession and gradual integration as on the process of that. And from that, first, about this DCFTA revision, it's important, but as was already mentioned multiple times, because it followed ATMs. The net effect is regretfully not positive, but negative for Ukrainian exports to the EU because the market access was de facto partly closed. The benefits of the new agreement are definitely that we do have larger TRQs, more like space for duty-free trade compared to what we had in the previous DCFTA version. We do have much more predictability. We know what will be for next 3 years, at least it's not three times a year change. At least you know, that's part of the story. But basically, according to the estimates done by Institute for Economic Research and Policy Consulting, together with German economic team, the losses of the Ukrainian exports to the EU will be 1.1 billion of US dollars in annual terms, and that has to be somehow compensated. And one ACA could be one of the opportunities. We also estimated how it would bring, what it would mean in terms of exports, and it gives about 0.6, 1.1 increase if we get ACA for just these three sectors, which is machinery, electromagnetic compatibility, and low voltage equipment. And if we get quickly all 27, which potentially could be possible, then the gains could be tripled, and that might at least compensate at least half of the losses of what we got from the restricted market access. SEPA is also good. Our estimates are more careful. We have about from 70 to 100 million dollars of annual gains, which still is about 6 or 7 times more than what Moldova expected. But okay, sizes are quite different. And we do have some other opportunities. For example, the much more gains. We still did not finalize quantification of that of logistics, because basically if we do a lot to have much faster checks, better joint checks that can eliminate risks of corruption and improve the whole process, if we develop all the infrastructure around border crossing, if we develop, we have much more digitalized railway operation with smoother transactions and many other very technical things, that we will get a boost. Because actually the story about Ukrainian foreign trade and Ukrainian trade with the EU is now not only about trade regime. If 5 years ago it was about trade regime, now it's about logistics primarily. So it's a physical ability to ship something and how much it costs. Plus insurance. I'm sure Oleksandra will say much more about that. So I don't think that we need a new list. It would be great if we get the benefits that are already on table. And with ACA, I mentioned Ukrainian gains. EU gains will be higher, at least initially, because actually Ukraine imports much more of these products from EU than Ukraine exports to EU. And it might be that if European business understands these gains, they will help to push that through and to have everything adopted faster. It will be really mutually beneficial. To get it. but accession first.
Thank you very much. Thank you for these numbers and your about tangible results of integration for Ukrainian and EU side. And I would like if Oleksandra wants to add some concluding remarks about sectors, and we can turn to our audience for questions.
Thank you, Svitlana. I will be very quick. First of all, I understood that I have not congratulated Janis for one of the quickest screening in the whole history of the European Union. So, which is remarkable. I mean, it's in any case remarkable for both sides, yes. The first thing. The second thing, what I wanted to say, is there any possibility to conduct cost-benefit study based on DG and EST? Because I will explain where I'm leading to. We hear a lot about how costly will be the integration of Ukrainian agricultural sector to common agricultural policy. Also, we have the thing about the structural funds I referred to, and then the question of rebuilding Ukraine, and so on and so forth. However, there is not enough, if there is any, studies on what benefits would Ukraine bring to the European Union. And in here we can mention half of what been said at the beginning and what Veronika said. And I mean, we kind of see it from the perspective of agricultural sector, where Ukraine can definitely make European Union stronger, not just, interfering with the European farmers, but like thinking strategically, as we all love strategic autonomy and bioeconomy of the European Union. So if there is any way to do so, that would be great. Regarding the trade, also fast reflection. We understand that, imagine Ukraine, being restricted from different angles. We are restricted from the access to the usual sea routes, how we usually export it. This is the very big dream of all European farmers, for Ukraine to return to traditional markets, which is kind of impossible right now because we don't have enough ships, containers, and with very high insurance costs, which basically make Ukrainian products less competitive on the third markets. But at the same time, we also, from this year, already restricted in the access to the European Union. Basically, we could somehow stabilize our trade flows, and that would be possible if at least one of the roads was open. But in the case when we have limited access to both the EU and to the sea channels of export, it makes it very difficult for the producers to actually diversify their export routes. This is not a question to you. This is just, I'm reflecting on the general conditions we are, and the fact that this, in any case, will influence the production and the general economic situation. And in this case, this staged approach in which we could slowly but kind of, confidently include sector by sector into the single market, I think this would, I'm not saying this from the perspective of just agricultural sector, but as just macroeconomist as I am. If we would include step by step, I think this would give us more stability and predictability in terms of planning of our macro-financial stability, but also, supporting the budget and all the other stuff that we are definitely very much grateful for the support from the European Union. Overall, the whole EU integration process will be very much interesting. It will be a very bumpy road, and I think all of us will find our speed limits before some bumps. But in general, as more we have dialogues like this, maybe open with the public, maybe closed behind the doors, that we can actually discuss something that are on the table on both sides, I think the better the whole integration process will be. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we at EPC, we are ready to help you and to do such events, more such events in the future, and welcome you again. And I would like to turn to the audience. If you have your questions, please, we still have a little bit of time for questions. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you very much. I'm Irina Skleban, Brussels representative of Naftogaz of Ukraine, so one of the companies, Ukrainian, but still present in Brussels. I have a question. I was following up all the panelists were saying, but from business perspective, I would have a question to Veronika. I still quite can't understand why you insist accession first, because in the sense of making or development opportunities for business, what Janis was referring to, what Oleksandra was referring to, I think we should need to rip up every benefit we can help already develop from the available instruments. I have, and just to continue, yet another argument from what Oleksandra was saying, I know, for example, one transport route from Ukraine, which is not congested, is gas transport system. And we have one of the product which has been heavily congested by access to the EU market is biomethane. We've been struggling, me personally, it's not about me personally, with all colleagues from agriculture sector, from the energy sector. We were struggling with this issue for 3 years already, at least I can have in mind, and we are still not there. And there are some arguments which has been built on evidence, let's say, from the European institutions, but some arguments which are really, for me, a cognitive bias. So we need to think also in these terms. So it's kind of there. It's a fruit. It's low-hanging fruit. It's a low-hanging fruit which can give tangible benefits in quite a time. Why we should wait for accession?
Thank you. It's a great question. On the one hand, I fully agree with you that if it's a low-hanging fruit and we can reap it on the way, that's what we have to do. Actually, we have to reap anything that we can on the way. But if we are trying to unblock methane and we do not get accession in 10 years, but we are working on methane only, whatever, methane is not the issue, and any product. While you can wait 2 years and get the whole country methane and all other products, or you can work on 2 years on methane and delay the rest of the economy for these 2 years. If the second situation is the case, let's try to get through for everything. So I hope we can get as many as we can in a gradual integration in the process. But if we have only, I don't know, not 1,000, but only 30 people in Ukraine working on all process, and they have to choose, do they go for ACA now, or they are negotiating the conclusion, the whole first chapter, let's do first chapter in its entirety, because otherwise we can get the situation. I'm not sure that the window of opportunities for becoming a member is infinite. I'm not sure that Ukraine will, if we have the first round of enlargement with smaller countries now from Balkan states, and then if Moldova is decoupled and also enters now, that it will be still appetite to get in Ukraine later. So the question is, do we should not be distracted by attractive but some smaller gains if these smaller gains really preclude accession. I hope we have resources for everything. I really hope for that. But if not, I would say that bigger goal first. But that's my line of thinking, and I already see that you do not agree.
Veronika, I can say from the perspective of the business, I hope European Commission has the capacity to complete both tasks. Also, because for the business, it is important to be able to trade, which also means the export, which means gain tax revenues and actually keep people working in the country. Because if we will not be able to manage these two tasks at the same time, that means that we might not end up doing any of them. Why? Because there will be no proper economy and no proper business to support the government in its integration path. And that's why, we need to export biomethane and bioethanol to the EU. Otherwise, the economic benefits would be lost as well.
Let's hope we manage.
Any other questions, please?
Thank you for a very exciting, dynamic panel. My name is Ludmila Palamar. I'm from Connecta Consulting, representing the firm here in Brussels. And my question to probably any of the speakers who's willing to take it, because all of you touched upon this topic today during your remarks, and it's related to communication and stakeholder engagement. So both in the EU, but also in Ukraine, if we talk especially about smaller companies and we talk about SMEs in agriculture or any sector for that matter that is heavily affected by the gradual integration. First question is, who is responsible for communicating with them, or who is best positioned to communicate with them? Oleksandra already mentioned the government of Ukraine, but is it only the government? Who else should be doing it, especially here in the EU? How much information is too much? Because as Veronika said, gradual integration is a lot of technicalities. So who and how to draw the line or build the balance in terms of amount of information we deliver, and how to make sure we, especially we as Ukraine, reach the EU-based businesses, such as, unfortunately, Marcin is not online anymore, right? But maybe any of the panelists here could reflect on that, how to reach the EU-based businesses, both with short-term technicalities, but also with the long-term economic gains you all talked about today.
Business, I got it. Okay. From the perspective of the business, first of all, business itself should be interested in. Why I'm saying so? Because we understand that the government does not have this capacity to reach everyone. Government needs to reach out to basically associations. That's the thing. The key here would be to have those intermediary stakeholders that would gain information, knowledge, expertise, and then would disperse it between the different producers or SMEs or you name it. With the agricultural sector, it is kind of very difficult. Why? Because it's rural areas. There is a limited access to the internet in Ukraine in rural areas, and most of them are elderly people. I'm being very honest. And with this category is a bit more challenging to speak, because you are challenged to cover everyone. I mean, we have 26 million hectares of arable land. The average size of agricultural producers is 500 hectares, roughly. We can understand that's quite a big amount of producers, and it's difficult to touch all of them, while we also have the maybe tax authorities that in any case are getting to all the producers. Maybe through tax channels we will be able to provide the information.
It could be local like local communities, some authorities, some elected bodies. It depends. And the question is, you have a very good question, what amount of information is really needed? The question, do we need to tell all elderly producers about all of that?
No. We definitely need to have some kind of translation. But that's true. Yeah, but I mean, for example, right now we're trying to explain to Ukrainian producers in Vinnytsia region about environmental issues, which are in CAP, what CAP it is by itself. And I mean, I'm not saying capacity building, impact assessment, and all the other strange words for them, because I need to explain the vital core of this issue with the very plain words for them to have a final understanding what it is.
And if I can supplement what Oleksandra said, I fully agree with her. Basically, you mentioned government. Government has to, it works actually, and it has continued to work with business associations, any business like representatives. It can be also chambers of commerce that accumulate information and get access to business. It can be think tanks like ours, which also work with businesses, but also work with society, awareness-raising campaigns. Actually, now we have internet and we have a lot of resources from very specific, you can read law, to something very simplified in Ukrainian and definitely in EU. And the question, you said that Ukraine EU-based business. I'm not sure whether what has to be done for EU-based business, probably only implications would mean Ukraine accession for them, because it's no explanation of legislation or something like that. It's absolutely other channel, and maybe Janis said what is done, but basically EU is doing a lot already to explain in all the EU process to EU business, and this Ukrainian accession is only a small part of that. So there are many stakeholders, should be multiple channels, and then everything will hopefully work.
I can just maybe add that I would also expect business associations to take a lead on a number of areas, but at the same time, we also need to make sure that the relevant government authorities would also make all the information available. If we would now look at ACA, for example, there's been legislative changes happening already so far in the standardization area, in the metrology and all of that. So all of these sectors should make their information available to the businesses. And as it was said, businesses will find it if it is available, if they will look for it. But then for spread of the wider information, I think chambers of commerce, business associations would certainly make sense. I know that at some point also that this was what happened like at the last or later stages of the accession in the previous rounds of accessions. Also governments started to conduct like a wider information campaigns, so that to explain to the also society as a whole, like what kind of changes are now taking effect. And what does it mean for companies, for people, so that they would know, because their life is affected. So that's also something to think that this would be coming up at a certain point of time.
Thank you very much. I think we need to stop here. Thank you for our speakers. Thank you for our audience for your for being with us today. And yes, thank you very much.
Thank you for organizing that.